Hello everyone, I'm Rob James, and the new Panasonic camera, the one beneath the sheet, has been unveiled, or rather taken out of a backpack, and has a name, the new Panasonic EVA 1. So here in the UK, I stayed up to the early hours of the morning to watch the presentation. Maybe you're a tech head, camera geek like me, but you had better things to do on a Friday night or just really needed your sleep. So what I thought I'd do a quick video. I will make it quite quick if I can, because videos like this become irrelevant pretty quickly once more specs and things are released. But I thought it would be a little video about what we do know, what we don't know, and maybe we'll try not to get too much into an in-depth comparison, a little bit of a comparison to some of the similar price point, that kind of affordable owner-operator pro 4K cinema camera. So Panasonic EVA 1, what we do know is it's an EF mount. That was what most people thought. Super 35, it's good to know that. It's a 4K camera, obviously, but it's downsampled from a 5.7K sensor. So that's quite cool. Other cameras use downsampling, and what that gives you is a very rich, detailed image. So that's a nice feature. However, the sensor isn't complete, and those specs are not completely solid yet. So let's not get too excited. The footage, the test footage we've seen has been very minimal, and to me it didn't really show anything. I was watching it on Facebook Live. The quality of that isn't great, so I'm not going to comment on image quality at all. It's also a 10-bit camera, definitely in 4K and probably in other modes as well. There may be an option to output that higher res of the sensor in a RAW mode in a future update, but we can't see the camera yet, so we don't really know. So those are quite exciting specs. So with the dual ISO, that's a feature that's come from the VariCam. Not something I was familiar with, to be honest, but what it seems you can do is you can set your native ISO either lower or higher. So we don't know the exact values on this new EVA 1, but on the VariCam it's 800 as a lower setting, native ISO 800, and it's native ISO 5000, so dual native ISOs. And what that gives you is it gives you very clean low light images if you go for the higher value. So that's very exciting. Say we don't know exactly what's going to be on this new Panasonic camera. They haven't released that. In fact, there's loads of specs that are just speculative. God, that's a terrible sentence. But there's lots of stuff we don't know for sure. But what we do know is a little bit about the features and maybe some of how that's going to benefit the user. It takes SD card media. That's cool. But what we do know as well is for the 10-bit 4K, you're going to need the very fastest cards available. And that puts it at a similar price point to other kind of professional media. It will still be cheaper than things like XQD cards, but by the time you've got the fastest, and especially brands like SanDisk cards, the price is very comparable. You know, to get a decent amount of media to shoot on for a whole day or a couple of days, or as much as you need for your type of productions, you're going to be saving kind of a couple £100. It's not thousands. However, SD cards are still significantly cheaper any speed than CFast 2 cards. CFast 2 cards are quite pricey, and obviously we're not talking about S/S Pro Plus cards. That's a slightly different territory. We're talking about the affordable camera setups and the media they use. Don't know much about power. It's bound to take standard Panasonic batteries of some sort that fit inside the body. The design of the camera itself is very small and compact. Got to say, instant comparison would be the Sony FS5 and also the Canon cameras, either the C300 with its removable handle or C200 as well. All these cameras are a similar kind of boxy modular shape. So it's an EF mount. That's great. There are other lens mounts available. Super 35. It's what people expect. It's good to know that. The 10-bit is great. The high frame rate or slow motion modes, 240 frames in HD, is also brilliant. I don't know all the ins and outs of that. We don't know if it's cropped. I hope it's not, but it might be. If it's a 2K mode, it could well be cropped. Sometimes the crop mode can be useful, actually, especially if you're shooting something like sport. actually that extra throw on the lens can be useful. So it's not always a downside, but it is annoying if you've got a fixed lens, you shoot with primes, and then you switch into another mode, and all of a sudden you get a different equivalent focal length or field of view. I can see maybe why that's a bit of a problem, but it's just one of those things you have to work around if that's the case. But we don't know, so can't speculate too much or dwell too much on that. Interesting styling with the Panasonic cameras. They seem to, this one in particular has red piping. I think it looks a bit like the A-Team van, which is a slightly odd choice. I'd probably want to gaffer tape that up actually, so it's all black. Maybe that makes me sound ultra conservative, I don't know. It's just most cameras are kind of black or matte black is what you expect with pro equipment. They're all pretty faceless, especially things like broadcast cameras. They all look the same really. So Panasonic have done that, I think, as a little bit of a gimmick. Maybe it's no different to Canon's red ring on their L series lenses, but it definitely stands out. So it's a slightly odd move. Minimal buttons, but still enough, but not minimal buttons actually. Plenty of buttons on the side. Maybe it's just a little bit less cluttered than something like an FS7, but probably quite a well thought out layout. I'd say it's similar to kind of Canon's cameras. I kind of like the side of Canon's cameras. It's quite easy to feel what you need and get your fingers on the right buttons. That is quite important actually when you're operating a camera for, you know, several hours a day, day in, day out. However, this new Panasonic camera is also meant to be very compact, looks very, very neat, but also it's also meant to be very light as well. I guess a similar kind of weight to something like the FS5, which is a very diddy, small, compact, lightweight camera. The form factor of that does have some advantages at times. However, no camera is light by the time you've rigged it up with batteries, lenses, especially external recorders, other power solutions. You add V-Locks to anything, it's going to be pretty heavy, pretty solid. By the time you've added something like a base plate and some moose bars or some kind of rod attachment follow focus, every camera's got a significant weight, especially if you're using it all day. So let's not be too fooled by that. Don't really want to get into an in-depth comparison, but in terms of its initial specs, it really does have many advantages over Canon's C200. The reason I would compare it to that camera is the price point for this new Panasonic EVA 1 is meant to be less than $8,000. So that would be what? About 623 in the UK plus tax, or plus VAT I should say. So that's almost exactly the same price as both the C200 and also the Sony FS7. So all of these cameras in terms of their recommended retail price are almost identical, and probably with media and power and other accessories, the shooting kits are going to be very similar. You know, again, you're talking a difference of several £100s, not thousands, or, you know, it's not going to be significantly different in terms of the price you're paying for these things, but the features are different. So the 10-bit, that's great. Possibly going to have a raw output from the camera, and that's the way I prefer it. You don't really necessarily need raw in the camera, and if you do, then, you know, you've probably got quite specific needs for that. The fact that you can get it out of the camera is great. You can do that on the FS5 with the paid upgrade, on the FS7 with the add-on adapter on the back. Can do it on the C300 Mark II as well with an external recorder. So whether or not they add RAW to this Panasonic camera, we don't know. It's not something I'm that excited about in the C200, if I'm being honest. What I'm more excited about is the fact that it's a Canon. It's going to have that Canon look that people are used to and people really like, and also the dual autofocus. So whether or not we know stuff about the autofocus on the Panasonic, I don't think anything was mentioned, or I just didn't pay attention to that bit. But you know, they're cameras that are coming from slightly different angles, I think. The infrared is also something that I'm not really going to comment on now until we have more information. So I'm just trying to give some information that might be relevant to you if you didn't watch the live stream. But really, I'm not telling you anything you can't find out elsewhere. Most people wouldn't admit to that, would they? But I have. And on that bombshell, I'm going to sign off.